There may be many reasons for human destruction, but there are a few main reasons that can affect everyone. By knowing these reasons, we can take steps to improve our lives. Friends, today I will tell you in this story what are the mistakes of a human being that destroy a person. If we know the reason for our destruction, then we can make our lives happy. So, let's start the story. A long time ago, there was a wealthy man in a city. Seth lived there. That Seth had every kind of comfort, but he had no children. He was always worried about the pain of not having a child. Then one day, he learned that his wife was pregnant, and he took great care of her. One day, Seth was overjoyed to see that a child was born in his house. His son grew up quickly. Then Seth decided to send his son to a gurukul so that he could study and become a scholar. To gain knowledge, he sent him to the gurukul. At the gurukul, the child studied well and followed all the orders of his guru. In such a situation, the child gradually became the most promising student there. At the gurukul, the child studied all the Vedas, Puranas, and Shastras, and became a great scholar. But it is said that no one knows when times will change. One day, his parents died due to a natural disaster, and when his parents died, the child's education was not completed. When the child heard the news that his parents were no longer in this world and everything was ruined, he became deeply attached to the material world. Afterward, the child said that after completing his education at Gurukul, he would spend his entire life in the service of others. Once the child's education was complete, he became a monk and went to the forests of the Himalayas, far away from worldly affairs. Giving up teaching, over time, his name began to spread everywhere, and people from all places came to him for guidance. Many people began to seek him for solutions to their problems. He solved their issues easily, and thus, he became famous throughout the state. However, the king of the city where he lived was a cruel person. When the king heard about the monk, he decided to meet him. The next morning, the king left his palace to meet the monk. He went to the monk's cabin, and upon arriving, the king saw him in the form of a sannyasi, a renounced ascetic. There was a different kind of glow on his face. When the king reached the sage, he felt immense peace. The sage sat near him and began to talk. From that very moment, the king decided to follow the path of righteousness. He thought that if this sadhu, holy man, could change him in just one meeting, then if the sadhu stayed with him, his life would change. Thinking this way, the king took the sadhu to his palace. The king took great care of the monk. One day, the monk asked the king for permission to leave. Hearing this, the king invited him to stay at the palace for as long as he wished and assured him he would face no inconvenience. The sadhu accepted the king's offer, and the servants built a beautiful cabin for him. But after many years, the king and queen had to leave for another kingdom for important work. They appointed a servant to care for the sadhu in their absence. However, the servant fell ill and never returned. The sadhu, left alone, grew angry and scolded the king upon his return, saying, "Why take responsibility if you can't fulfill it?" The king apologized and vowed never to make the same mistake again. Time passed, and the sadhu was well taken care of, but the king had to leave once more for urgent work. Before leaving, the king told his queen to personally look after the monk. The queen agreed. She prepared food for the sadhu every day. But one day, the queen forgot to send food to the monk. Hungry, the sadhu decided to go to the palace to find out why. Upon entering the palace, he was struck by the queen's beauty. He returned to his cabin, but he could not forget her. He stopped eating and became weak. When the king returned and found the monk in such a condition, he asked what had happened. The monk confessed that after seeing the queen's beauty, he had become infatuated and could no longer live without her. Shocked, the king thought for a moment and asked the monk to follow him. The king then brought the sadhu to the palace, where the queen wore her most beautiful clothes and jewels. The king explained the situation to the queen. The queen reassured the king, telling him not to worry as she had a plan. She followed the monk to his cabin, but when they arrived, she said they couldn't stay there. The sadhu returned to the king to request a proper house. The king provided one, but the queen claimed it was still too dirty. Again, the monk went to the king, who then arranged for the house to be cleaned. When the queen and the sadhu finally entered the house, the queen asked, "Do you remember who you are? You were a great sage, revered by everyone. You were someone who guided others on the path of truth, but now you have become my slave because of lust." The sadhu was shocked and realized his mistake. He begged for forgiveness and returned the queen to the king, saying, "I was destroying my life, but now I understand. The downfall of a person comes from 4 habits: desire, lust, anger, and greed. These 4 habits lead to a person's ruin. If we can avoid them, we can lead happy lives. And so, the monk explained to the king that these 4 vices could destroy anyone, even those like him who had once been wise and disciplined.